Hey folks, it's time for another episode of RFA Insider.
That was Amy and I'm Eugene, and today on RFA Insider, we're going to find out all about scam centers in the Southeast Asian region.
And then in the second half, we'll check in with the Vietnamese service to hear the latest about the unofficial monk Thich Minh Tue, who's currently walking through Thailand on his way to India.
Another double interview episode, eh?
It's just like that sometimes.
Indeed. Well, RFA Insider starts right now.
靚生乜女話你？
咪嚟提，
tập trung vào chủ đề.
딴소리하지 마.
More than 7,000 foreign nationals rescued from Chinese-run online scam centers are stranded at the Thai-Myanmar border. The scam center victims represent more than 24 countries. Many were recruited under false pretenses and found themselves trapped in virtual slavery.
Like Filipino, Indonesia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Vietnamese, Chinese, Thai, lots of people, right?
The size and scale of the repatriation effort is straining Myanmar junta and Thai government resources. The pro-junta border guard forces, which control Myanmar's Myawaddy border region, say many governments have not yet arranged for the victims' repatriation. The 7,000 represent only a small part of the hundreds of thousands of people from around the world who were lured to scam centers in Southeast Asia. Okay, today on RFA Insider, we're going offbeat with renowned book author and RFA Investigative team member Abby Seiff, and we're going to discuss Southeast Asian scam centers.
And with Abby's appearance, we've now featured every current member of the investigative team based in DC here on RFA Insider. So welcome finally to the podcast, Abby.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, Abby is not in DC at the moment, so that is why we are joined via satellite. But first of all, talking about scam centers, as an English speaker, when I hear about scams, I immediately think of people in call centers. You know, they'll try to trick their victims by saying, hey, buy these gift cards and give me the codes so that I can release some funds from the bank, which I will forward to you. And then, of course, they don't forward the funds to you after you do that. I think the scams in Southeast Asia don't appear to be targeting English speakers, first of all. So who are they targeting primarily? And can you explain some of the most common types of scams?
Sure. That's true. Initially, they were mostly targeting Chinese, Taiwanese. Since then, it's gone global. So basically, every country has experienced this, including the United States. And, in some ways, it's similar to what you're describing, and that it's a parting someone from their money. What makes these scams different is they're really, they're much more involved, both at the back end in terms of who's running it, what the operation looks like, and then in the front end and what they're presenting to the victim. So usually they're scams that might take days, weeks, months, even years. They're trying to build up a relationship with somebody. They're trying to convince them to invest most often. These are known as pig butchering. And the idea is that you're fattening up the pig and then you're slaughtering them. And so the fattening up is getting them comfortable, whether it's thinking that they've befriended someone, whether they think that they meet an investment advisor who's really savvy, or most often thinking that they have met a romantic partner and slowly gained the trust of this person and, believe this is someone who, I should invest some money, I should do this crypto thing. And people have lost thousands, tens of thousands, even millions of dollars. It's really epic amounts of money that are being taken through these scams.
Okay, I'd say that's quite a catfishing scam there if you can get $1 million out of your target just by posting fake pictures and having conversations with them. That's pretty amazing.
I guess the next natural question would then be who's running these scam operations and where's the money going?
Yeah, this is a great question. The truth is it's not entirely clear. The thing about these scam operations is they're really decentralized. So we know it's a lot of Chinese organized crime. We know that there's local actors. These are not taking place in China. They're taking place across Southeast Asia. And now they're even going further afield, South America, the Middle East. But it seems like most of the people who are doing the operations are organized Chinese crime gangs. But it's happening with, a lot of complicity from locals. So whether that's, local warlords, whether that's local officials, those are the people that are helping provide security. Those are the people that are looking the other way, that are not sending the police in. So in terms of operation, it's really kind of this multifaceted group of individuals. And the money is going, it's going to the criminals, it's going to whoever they're paying off on the ground. It's a huge amount of money now that's getting stolen every year.
For listeners who might be new to this topic, could we briefly explain, I guess, what the issue is and how widespread the problem is? What are some of the areas that are chiefly involved? I know that usually we hear a lot about casinos being involved in this, and the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone especially. Are there any other areas? And basically, how widespread is the problem?
Yeah, the problem is incredibly widespread. I just looked it up. That says global cybercrime costs $10.5 trillion a year.
Wow.
The cyber scams themselves, it's about $64 billion a year, just the Southeast Asia cyber scams. So the main places that they are happening now are Cambodia, Myanmar, and Laos to a smaller degree. A lot of them are on the border of Myanmar and Thailand, and that's where we've seen these huge raids in recent days that we can talk about a bit later. What you had these areas that were already pretty lawless, like Phoi Phet in Cambodia. That's a border city near Thailand, and in these border cities, in Sihanoukville, which is on the coast, it's popular with Chinese. If you're from Vietnam, if you're from Thailand, if you're from China, you can't gamble inside your country. And so you go to neighboring countries or you go to regional countries where you're legally allowed to gamble. And so all these areas have there's kind of like a Wild West feel. There's the casinos. There's always been a lot of illegal activity in these areas. And basically what happened is in the pandemic, a lot of that business dried up. And so criminal actors started to look for a new way to make money. These cyber scams had sort of already been in existence using VoIP, which was like Skype, an earlier way to call folks on their phone. And so the casinos, basically got turned into these centers for this scams. And I think what happened was criminals realized this was a really great way to make money. Very, very low cost. You need internet, you need electricity. You don't need much else. And so they can be as small as what you described, the little call center in someone's back room, or they can be these tailor-built compounds. And, since the pandemic, we've started seeing a lot of these pop up, and these are huge, huge compounds. Often they're in special economic zones, which already have their own legal status within a country. So let's say you're Laos and you have a special economic zone. In theory, that's supposed to allow for, factories to build without having to go through a lot of bureaucracy. In reality, these are kind of a perfect place to commit crimes because law
the local police
really
can't really do anything there, and then the police
Exactly.
of the origin country that has the special economic zone can't do anything there either because it's another country.
Yeah, kind
Okay.
of. I mean, it's a really, you could not imagine a better gift to criminal syndicates. And so throughout these zones, not only in the zones, also in cities like Phnom Penh and Yangon, we see converted office buildings. We see tailor-made centers, which are just huge, multi-story buildings. There's bars on the windows. Anytime you see sort of a dorm-looking structure with bars on the windows, that's often a sign that people are being held there. And the other thing you need is manpower. And sadly, that's very easy to come by as well.
On the topic of the people doing the scam work, you don't imagine that people aspire to become a scammer when they grow up. So how did they fall into this line of work?
Yeah, without a doubt, some people are there knowing what they're doing, knowing that they can make good money for it. There's estimates, there's hundreds of thousands of people employed in the scam industry just in Southeast Asia. And that includes the people who are running the show. Some people are doing this willingly. But what's become very clear over the years is many, 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 many of them are enslaved. And what happens is, let's say you're a Burmese, 25-year-old, pretty well educated, speak English, speak Chinese. You're living in a war zone, not that many jobs. You want to be in IT. You go online, you see a job ad, and it's, a nice, well-paying job. And it seems like a good salary, and it's overseas, and you apply, they accept you.
Yeah, and then you get there and then you find out you applied for a job that doesn't really exist. And
exactly.
So then what happens after that?
Gosh, it can be a range of stuff. But let's say the most basic sort of story that we've heard, for instance, with this actor, Wang Xing, this famous Chinese actor who was recently kidnapped. He showed up in Thailand thinking he was going for an audition. He was kidnapped, put into a van, driven across the border into Myanmar, passport confiscated, brought into a scam center, and put to work. And, being put to work means there's a bunch of different jobs. So some of them are the faces, the attractive people who sort of come on and pretend to be the person that is your new friend or your new lover. Others are the people who are the ones who are catching them in the first place. So what they're doing is they're just messaging hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of numbers. Hey, how are you? Or sorry, I'm late. And you write back and say, I think you have the wrong number. And suddenly you're in a conversation. And I think what's not fully understood is those people on the other end are being forced to do this. If they don't make a certain amount of money every week or month, if they refuse to make these calls, if they try to leave, they're often tortured. And torture is really widespread and it's very well documented. A lot of people who have escaped have they're covered with wounds. They've talked about being electroshocked. We know that people have been killed. We know that sometimes people are held for ransom, extorting family members back home.
Wow.
So this is sort of how they're able to keep feeding the mill.
Mm-hmm. We've been covering stories about scams at least as long as I've been at RFA, since 2018. And I think another aspect is that a lot of these people, they have to pay for their quote-unquote training, and then they're in massive debt. And so that's how they're also stuck in these scams and having to scam and make a certain amount of money to service the debt that they owe to, I guess, they're technically their owners or they're the people that employ them. And so in addition to all of those things, that's another way to get people in debt, I guess. But yes, we have been hearing about the scam centers and pig butchering schemes for a couple of years now, and it seems that likely, obviously still going on. How have the Southeast Asian governments been able to deal with the problem? And what are some of the biggest challenges they have shutting down scam rings?
It's a really mixed bag, and quite frankly, it does not seem like there's a lot of political will, which is because there are people locally who are making money off of this. So, you will see repeatedly promises of crackdowns. You will see crackdowns. You will see rescues. You will see raids. Those happen in all these countries regularly. But what you do not see is kind of a really concerted effort to stop it. And what's interesting is this is true even though China, primarily their citizens who are being scammed. And so for a long time, it was really only focused on China. I used to live in Cambodia and work in Cambodia, and we'd sort of talk about, surely the Chinese government is worried about how much money that their citizens are losing, is worried about, would want to push Cambodia to crack down on this more, and you weren't seeing it. And that may be because they don't want to acknowledge it. It may be because there's some officials somewhere that are making money off of it. But you have not seen a kind of wholesale clear out. What has happened in the last month with Thailand, Myanmar, and China is really unusual. So to give some background about that, the actor I mentioned before, kidnapped, rescued very, very fast, I think within a week, and returned home. And that was a huge story domestically.
Okay, when you say domestically, you mean in China, right?
In China, yeah.
Okay. All right.
It was a huge story internationally too.
Yes.
But since then, there's been this really unprecedented operation. So the border guard forces in Myanmar and Myanmar, which are sort of a militia that is aligned with the junta, but it's a Korean nationality, they have been working with China and working with Thai authorities to clear out these major scam centers along the border. And I'm really curious how this will go, because they've gotten 7,000 people out of there. You know, there's probably tens of thousands more. Some people are a little skeptical. They say, you know, this is, it's a bit of a photo op. It's showing that they're doing something, but what's it going to look like in a few months? Are they going to drive through and are people going to keep the lights off and pretend they're closed, and then in a month or two it's going to be back up? Or are they really, really going to clear this out completely? And I think currently that's a big question mark. If you're one of the 7,000 people, you're just happy to be out there alive. Of course, the other issue is that housing, feeding, protecting that many people, and then getting them home is a massive operation.
Right.
And, some of the media reporting that's come out, it's clear that they're pretty overwhelmed, that they do not have the resources in place to help this many people at once. So maybe we will start seeing a slowdown in pulling people out of there. I'm not sure.
Okay, one thing we haven't quite really talked about, I guess, is, there's currently a civil war going on in Myanmar. What happens then if, I guess, an area controlled by one faction agrees to cut down these scam centers, but then they lose that territory where they are located, and then another, like a rebel faction, would come in and take control?
I mean, it's a big question mark. Some of the EAOs have been very anti-scam, have promised to shut down the centers in their midst. Others are clearly making money from them. And so I think there's not a kind of unilateral, like the junta's making money for them. They've shown a disinterest in shutting them down, but at times they also have shut them down and have. So it's not like there's like a single answer, or and I think that's the nature of these scam centers, and that's what makes it very complicated. They are like mushrooms. Even if every government was really committed to shutting them down, they can still pop up anywhere where they can get an internet connection, anywhere where they could get electricity.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if you see, maybe it's going to move from these huge things happening out in the open to smaller things. It could just happen in an apartment building. It could happen in the back of a restaurant.
Okay. So you did mention the term EAO, that's Ethnic Armed Organization. These are the groups that are either fighting on the side of the junta or fighting against it, not necessarily alongside each other. Myanmar is always very confusing to talk about.
Yes.
But
yes.
Is there any final word that you'd like to say on the matter?
Everybody thinks they are too smart to be scammed. Everyone thinks that, because they're educated, because they're street smart, because they're young and tech savvy, they're not going to be scammed. Anyone can be scammed. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really important to have empathy for victims, and to also, be careful, protect yourself, protect your family, and spare a thought for the people on the other end. They're not, more often than not, they're not criminals. They are victims who are in an even worse situation than you are.
All right. So thank you for coming on today, Abby, to talk to us about scam centers and, where we currently stand in terms of rescuing victims from Southeast Asia.
All right. And more RFA Insider will come up right after this.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much.
That was really great. I'm sorry.
You're listening to the RFA Insider podcast, made by two real-life staffers at Radio Free Asia.
If you'd like to send us feedback, there are many ways you can do this.
If you're listening to us on YouTube, you can write us in the comment section below.
You can also send us an email at insider@rfa.org or tweet at RFA Insider.
Or you could even visit us in person.
No, don't visit us in person.
Right, don't visit us in person, but do check out our webpage at rfa.org/English/insider to see our profiles and read summaries and show notes for every episode.
So tune in every other Friday and we'll take you behind the scenes.
And tell you what the news really means here at RFA Insider. All right, so I want to thank Abby again for coming on RFA Insider. We learned a lot about the scam centers and, how widespread the problem is.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have you ever been targeted in a scam before?
Yes. Or, don't you get those texts that are like, hey, it's me, Diana, when is my next piano lesson or something?
Okay, that's interesting. Have you ever responded to that? Obviously not, right?
I think the first time I got it, or a very vague one, it was like, hey, I'm outside or whatever. And I would respond and be like, who's this?
Oh, wow.
And then it'd be like, it's me, Rob. And then at that point, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, one time, I usually get the scam calls. So then people, they actually use my name and they say, yeah, we just wanted to confirm that you're accepting the subscription and it's going to be like $400 a year. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And then I was like, what is this for? And then I guess I keep asking so many questions and then eventually they hang up. They're like, oh, he's not going to take the bait, right? Or either that or I'll just start speaking Korean and see how they respond,
Yeah.
And then they just hang up, so.
I read that the origin or an earlier iteration of these scams was just more like calls, phishing in China and Taiwan.
Okay.
So when I lived with a Taiwanese friend during college, and I'd get a weird call, she'd be like, you're being phished. Don't pick it up.
All right. But enough about scam centers for now. Let's get into Podcast Free Asia. So today on Podcast Free Asia, first I'd like to mention that this is the 1-year anniversary episode of RFA Insider. We've been at it for an entire year.
We're 1 year old.
Yes, we are. And remember, I think something that you said in the second episode is that it's kind of a milestone for a podcast to get to the second episode, right?
Did I say that?
You did say that. And then I said, well, then I think, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11. That's the mark where you really have something. But we've been at it for a year. This is episode 27. I think I realized that in the last episode because it was episode 26, and 26 times 2, because we do it every other week, is 52. There are 52 weeks in a year. So that makes this a 1-year anniversary episode. But we didn't plan anything special for that.
Insert applause, balloon party sounds.
All right. But we do have several listener comments that I think would be fun to respond to. This was from our episode about Red Note, where we had Scheherazade talking about it. And that was, of course, in episode 24. And Red Note is the Chinese social media app that many TikTokers were fleeing to. Wendy Hack 8644 says, I am on Red Note. It's amazing. Everyone is so nice. They are way, with several Ys, better off than we are. I'm assuming that Wendy Hack is American or is purporting to be American. Right? Okay. And then Titan Best Moon replies to her and says, yeah, I love Red Note. It's fun and has hot girls. Now, so I'm just wondering here, I think we mentioned that Red Note is predominantly women, or at least it was originally.
Yeah, I think that's how it started off, at least. Lifestyle, makeup, diet, travel tips.
But not making a judgment of what this person said, certainly there are attractive men on there too, I would think, at this point. You even mentioned that there was the one guy that he was asking, how can I get a wife? And then he became a hot guy. Yes,
through the help of the Red Note users. He followed and listened to all their advice, and they slowly shaped him into...
Okay, then. All right. And then finally, this is a third comment in the string that says, a few years ago, tens of thousands of Americans traveled to China each year, but now only a few hundred do. Why is it that those Americans who once lived in China no longer return? Not to mention the countless Chinese citizens who flee the country every year. Okay, I wanted to fact check this first of all. So in 2019, 2.3 million Americans visited China. So it's not tens of thousands, it's millions. But then, COVID-19 really hurt tourism. So there was certainly a decrease. But I don't think it was from tens of thousands to hundreds, but millions to perhaps hundreds of thousands. I don't know. I didn't find the statistics post-COVID of how many Americans are going there, because there's not many, I suppose, or not many firms that do that without you having to pay for it. But we'll say that the overall reduction has been drastic. So in 2019, China welcomed 162 million visitors, and that fell to 27 million in 2020. So I guess massive reduction. And tourism hasn't quite recovered, but there are many reasons for that, including, recovery from COVID, and then, the State Department had travel advisories and things like that. So, but let's continue on with the comment. Americans can criticize their government and complain about their lives, but have you ever seen Chinese people on Red Note criticizing their government or talking about how hard life is? That is what censorship means, only presenting the good to the outside world while hiding bad.
I would say, I'm not a native... I'm illiterate in Chinese, but from my observations on Chinese social media, there's still space for people to, complain about their lives or how hard they're working. Or maybe there was a viral news once. There's a popular idol program in China. It's Produce 101, sort of where you get a bunch of young guys to compete to be a star.
Right.
And then all the Chinese netizens kept voting for this one Russian guy who didn't want to be on the show anymore. He was this sucks. I hate dieting. I don't like practicing.
Right.
Just vote me off so I can go home. And then they were sisters, let's make him grind like us. And they kept voting. So there is still humor and space to kind of comment on your, situation in life.
Right. And then recently I do recall one of the stories that we covered regarding China was that somebody had made a pop song, and that went viral, and it was about how difficult life was.
Yeah.
If you're of the young generation and you can't find a job even though you have a grad school degree or something like that.
Or there was a rap one about how bleak living in the country was.
So people do complain about how hard life in China is, but maybe you can't really, I'm not sure about this, I'm just speculating. Maybe you can't really say, oh, my life sucks, everything's difficult, and the reason for it is because of Xi Jinping or the Chinese Communist Party. And
I'm sure there's cultural differences as well between how much you can say, how you say it. So,
but yes, I thought this comment was very interesting.
It is.
So that is a sharp contrast. But again, if you're on a social media platform like Red Note or TikTok, maybe you're more focused on getting views and complaining about the government that has its angle, but that's something that I think that more older people do rather than very young people who would be on those kinds of social media. Right.
And we talked about with Shahrazad, some things still can't be talked about on certain platforms, such as Uyghur activism.
Okay.
In some ways.
But if in the future you would like us to respond to your comment, then please leave us a comment. And we told you how at the beginning of this segment. But let's move on to Double Offbeat.
蓝生乜女話呢？
咪嚟提，
tập trung vào chủ đề.
딴소리 하지 마.
Double offbeat.
And now it's time to go Double Offbeat. We're checking in with RFA Vietnamese Service Director Son to get the latest on Thich Minh Tue, the Vietnamese monk who is currently walking from Vietnam to India. Welcome back to our podcast, Son.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So listeners may recall that Son graced us with his presence back in episode 10 when we first talked about Thich Minh Tue here on RFA Insider. So first of all, for those who may have missed our earlier episode on Thich Minh Tue, could you please bring us up to speed? Why is he referred to as an unofficial monk? And also, why is he walking from Vietnam to India?
So thanks for your question. Those are two important questions for those who have followed the monk. One of the very important thing is that he is not considered a monk in Vietnam.
Right.
Because in the country, you have to be recognized by the government.
Right.
Before you can say that you're a monk. And you have to be registered with the Buddhist church. So Thich Minh Tue is none of that. He did not register with the church. He did not apply for anything. He said that he just wanted to follow Buddha teaching and he don't want to be bound by any rules or regulation. He just wanted to be a free person who practiced Buddhism. That's why we cannot call him a monk due to the regulation in the country. But that doesn't stop everyone who follow him from calling him a monk.
Right.
So now next question is, why he's walking to India? Is such a very long and challenging journey, right? So back in Vietnam, before June 2024, Thich Minh Tue has been walking back and forth between North and South Vietnam for years without any problem.
Right.
But suddenly, the government put a stop to that. In June the 2nd, 2024, while he was resting on his way back to the south after marching up north, he and his follower was ambushed by police. Police then split them and made them sign in a statement committing not to walk again. And they put Thich Minh Tue into a lot of people suspect a secret location, practically a house arrest, some sort of that. And eventually, due to a lot of pressure from his follower, the government had to release him and restricted him in a limited location in his hometown. But still, thousands of people came to pay respect to him. So eventually, the government thought that is not a sustainable solution to these issues of Thich Minh Tue because the attention to him was still increasing day by day. So eventually, they somehow suggested that if he wanted to continue to walk, because walking is such an essential element of his practice.
Right.
In order to practice the school of Buddhism, you need to walk every day. You can only eat once a day and drink once a day. You are not allowed to sleep at the same location. So it's very essential to him that he's moving every day.
I see.
So not allowed to move is basically not practicing what he's believed in.
Right.
So he was confronted with two options. Stay in Vietnam and not being able to practice what he believed in, or leave the country. And he chose the latter.
I see.
So we met him in Bangkok twice, and we did ask him why did he decide to go to India. And his answer was because he admired Buddhas, right? He's a follower of Buddha. To him, Buddha is his teacher. So he decided to walk to India to visit Buddha's birthplace.
I see.
To him, that is a way to show his respect to Buddha. Yeah, so that to answer your question.
Yeah, and so the current situation is he's in Thailand and he's continuing to travel on foot, and eventually he will walk through Myanmar. But before we get to that, when we were planning this episode, you told me that on the Vietnamese podcast, you were talking about the differences between how he was treated in Thailand versus Vietnam. So what are some trends that you noticed? What are some of the key findings?
Yeah, well, the stark contrast is that in Thailand, he has been able to walk freely. That's very different, which did not happen in Vietnam, right? As I just said, in Vietnam, he was obstructed from walking, eventually had to leave the country. But in Thailand so far, it has been more than 2 months. He hasn't encountered any difficulties from the Thai government. As a matter of fact, the local authority has just extended his visa.
Oh, good.
In Thailand, which is...
You said it. I remember reading something that it was going to expire like in a week. And
exactly. Yeah.
But
so
they extended it. That's
yeah.
good.
On the very last day of his 60 days. So as a Vietnamese national, he's allowed to stay in Thailand for 60 days. But toward the very end of that, the government decided to give him another 2 weeks.
Oh.
So he can reach the border with Myanmar without any issues regarding the legality of his stay in the country. So yes, in Vietnam, he was not allowed to walk, not to mention he was attacked a lot by the Buddhist church because he was not registered and therefore not supported by the Buddhist community in Vietnam. But in Thailand, no such thing happened to him. He was able to walk freely. Even the Thai police came and pay respect to him.
Wow.
And Vietnamese allowed to follow him. Not only Vietnamese from the country allowed to see him, but Vietnamese everywhere around the world allowed to arrive and pay respect to him and walk with him as well. So yeah, that's a stark contrast between Thailand and Vietnam, which is a shame because he's a Vietnamese,
right?
Yeah.
and he has more freedom while walking in a foreign land That is just bizarre. Yeah.
Also, like, if you look at it from the Vietnamese point of view, I would think that this is almost like an attraction that you could encourage tourism by having people come to follow him. But I guess the Vietnamese government's stance on Buddhism is not as, I guess, liberal as in Thailand.
In Thailand, that's correct. Yeah.
I think this makes me curious. Is there a great difference in involvement with like Vietnamese government and Thai government towards religion or Buddhism?
Oh, I happen to have spent 5 years living in Thailand before, so I have some experience about how Thai people practice Buddhism, and I am a Vietnamese myself, so I can see the differences, and also the way in which government involved in religion. So in both Vietnam and Thailand, Buddhism is the most influential religion in both countries. Yeah. But in Thailand, Buddhism has a lot deeper influence into government's practice than in Vietnam. So the very, very, very interesting image where it appeared recently that the government official and Thai police who work on Thich Minh Tue application to extend his stay in Thailand volunteered to pay the fee for him.
Wow.
And upon finishing all the paperwork, right, when he walked out of the police station, the police was standing on the side and whining to him, showing respect to him.
Yes.
None of that thing happened in Vietnam because it is a country that ruled by the Communist Party, and the communist ideology is to reject any religion, right? And so they fail to reject religion, then they change to controlling all the religion. Okay. So in Vietnam, that's how things work. But in Thailand, it doesn't seem like the government trying to do that. It seems like the government is so influenced by Buddhist teaching. They practice it, government official, and they try. It's so natural that they just think that a monk is someone you should respect instead of someone you should control. Mm-hmm. That's just a basic difference between the two governments, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so it's more or less smooth sailing in Thailand, but I do wonder. We talked about the visa problem that's been resolved. Has there been any other kind of issue between Thich Minh Tue and maybe the people who are following them? Has he had any, I guess, stumbling blocks or roadblocks along the way? Difficulties?
So interestingly, the difficulties did not come from the Thai government, but from the Vietnamese side.
Oh.
So we've been reporting a lot on how the Vietnamese government wanted to control his trip to India by sending a former police officer to escort him. So this person claimed to be the leader of the delegation.
Right.
He stated publicly that the Vietnamese government gave him a certificate for that.
Okay.
Well, just so you know, in Vietnam, you need certificate for everything.
Right.
Okay? So he claimed to be the leader of the delegation. He got the certificate from the authorities back home in Vietnam to do that, and he has tried to control the monks. What he has been doing is that he would bar anyone from approaching the monk. Every information about the monk has to go through him. Mm-hmm. So even we send a journalist to greet the monk the moment they cross the border from Laos into Thailand, and this former police officer barred from talking to the monk.
Oh, okay.
But eventually the monks realized that they was being controlled by this person, and that it's just not how things work. Because Thich Minh Tue himself said that he trying to practice all these ideas from Buddha, and he cannot practice it freely if someone is there controlling every aspect of his journey, right? So eventually the monks had the meeting and they agreed that the former police officer need to go, and he left. But after leaving, he still tried to gain back influence and control, and he and his supporter. By the way, he has millions of supporters back in Vietnam.
Okay,
he is very influential because after weeks and weeks of being the sole source of information, he has convinced people that he is a trustworthy person, and without him, the monk would not survive.
Oh.
That's what he has successfully convinced a lot of people. So now he has tried in many ways to influence the monk's journey, trying to obstruct even the process of getting the visa extended by the Thai authorities and everything else. But so far, it seems like all his attempts have failed. Yeah.
Okay. So you did mention several times the monks, plural. So I just wanted to say that he's not going by himself, obviously. There are other groups of monks that are traveling with him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So originally, Thich Minh Tue walked by himself in Vietnam. He's been doing that for 5-6 years now, and he did everything by himself. But after people started paying attention to him, others was inspired by that and decided to join him.
Right.
I have to emphasize that Thich Minh Tue himself always said that he has no followers because he have never asked anyone to follow him.
Right.
But he would not turn down anyone. So that's his spirit. If you want, you can join me. If you don't like it anymore, you can leave. I do not ask you to come, and I will not reject you either. So that's his spirit. So far, the delegation has around 16 or 17 monks, if I'm not mistaken. And the number only increased. The longer he walks, the more challenge he encounters, the more people join him. And what interesting is that many of whom that are walking with him now were not monks.
Oh.
Before they learned about Thich Minh Tue, they decided to become monks only after they learned about him. That's the interesting thing. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, are these like quote unquote official state sanctioned, like state sponsored monks, or are they more like unofficial monks like Thich Minh Tue?
So those who follow him are not official monks because they have, I guess they inspired by his idea of being a free person who practice Buddhism instead of subjected yourself to regulation. So they decided to follow him and not register themselves with the Buddhist church, Buddhist Sangha in Vietnam. Yep. So back in Vietnam, these people are not considered official monks. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so let's move on to Myanmar, where we know the country is currently embroiled in civil war. It sounds kind of risky for Thich Minh Tue to go there. So why would he plan to, and what would he gain from crossing Myanmar?
So to Thich Minh Tue, because the essentiality of his practice is that he reject all means of transportation. Mm-hmm. He would not go to India in any way rather than walking. That's his commitment to his belief. So the only way to walk to India from Vietnam, not the only way, but the shortest distance is to walk through Laos, Thailand, Myanmar, and then reach India from the Myanmar border. So in recent interviews, he did tell people that he have been informed of the conflicts in Myanmar, and it did pose some concerns regarding not his own safety, but what he worries is that whether he would be able to enter Myanmar. So to Thich Minh Tue, he's not worried about his own safety. He's not worried about the war or whether he would be in any sort of danger if he walked in Myanmar. The only concern is whether he can enter the country or not. Yeah, so that's what he has been saying in recent weeks. Yeah.
Okay, so I was just wondering though, like, if he were to walk through Myanmar, wouldn't that be kind of like a message of peace? Like, hey, all this war is going on, but I'm just going to walk through it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, has there been any questions along that line asked of him?
No, because his follower has mainly concern for his own safety. Right. They would not worry about what kind of signal or message he was sent by walking through the country. And he himself never said that by walking through Myanmar he wanted to send any
Okay.
message. He just wanted to reach India.
I see. I guess I just assumed then. But
Yeah.
let's say that he gets to the Myanmar border and he can't enter. Then what
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah, so some people did ask that question. So the idea of Buddhism is that you cannot predict future. So Thich Minh Tue has consistently said that. Well, let's see what happens. That's not something he can control. And the essentiality of Buddhist teaching is that you have to trust that things happen for a reason.
Yeah, and
And if he cannot enter the country, he believed that there might be another way. So to follow, I have realized a lot of things covering the monk. We cannot talk about him using logic.
Yeah.
The norms that we usually use. We actually have to judge it through his own lens. Yeah. So people have, although his followers have mentioned a few options. If they're not allowed to enter Myanmar, there's another way, walk through China.
Okay.
Even though a lot of people doubt about that possibility because China is no different from Vietnam when it's come to controlling religion. And another way is to go to Sri Lanka by boat. However, then
you mentioned before that's a vehicle.
Exactly, boat is a vehicle, so it poses a very challenging task before the monks, whether to stick with his commitment of walking on foot only or taking the boat. Right. That's we have to wait and see.
Yeah, and so when you say though that he can't predict the future, so he's just going to see what happens. I think that's the nature of walking cross country anyway, because
exactly.
You don't bring food with you or money, and you just have what you have on you, and you walk from place to place, and people give you things.
Exactly.
Right? So I guess this, not having a plan is the whole point of it.
Yeah.
Also, to speak of the future, has he spoken about what he plans to do in India? Like how long he'll stay, what he'll do if he plans to go back to Vietnam?
Yeah.
Or has he been very go with the flow about that as well?
That's the question that people have. Right after he decided to go to India, because as a Vietnamese, everywhere you go, there is a limit to how long you can stay. You need visa, and the government over there need to have to authorize your stay, and there's always a limit to that. Like in Thailand, 60 days. Myanmar, probably between 2 weeks to 4 weeks. So a lot of people raise that question. He himself have said that he doesn't know. He will just his goal now is to reach India. What happened after that, he doesn't know yet. But according to the former police officer who escorted him from Vietnam to Thailand, it seems like the government plan is for him to remain in India.
The
Vietnamese government, because this guy who claimed to have been authorized by the Vietnamese government to escort the monk said so. So he said that the initial plan was to try and apply for a long-term visa so the monk and his follower can remain in India. So reading between the lines, it seems like the Vietnamese government don't want him back. It seems like that. So the longer he stay out of the country, the better. But he himself has never said anything about what his plan in India will be. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to know how popular this story about this unofficial monk is in Vietnam at this point, because last summer this was huge and that's all everybody was talking about. But it's been a while now, and he's now out of the country.
Yeah.
Is it still resonating very deeply with lots of people all over Vietnam?
Yeah. So right now there are about 12 people following him, and those people focus only one thing: live streaming his every move on YouTube and Facebook.
Yeah.
And if you skim all the live streams about his activity, there are always hundreds of thousands of people watching.
Okay.
Some well-known, we call them YouTuber, Some well-known YouTuber even have millions of people watching their video. So that to say that apparently people in Vietnam still follow him very closely, and a lot of people still care about his activity, not just in Vietnam. In the moment he arrived in Thailand, we have seen Vietnamese from around the globe arriving to see him. We see people from Australia, from Europe, US, other Asian nations all came to see him. So apparently him leaving the country and embark on this journey has inspired even more people and attract even more attention, because no Vietnamese has ever done that. So I guess, and we see that arriving in Myanmar, if he will, in the middle of war zone, you can imagine how much attention he will gather from that, right? Yeah. Not to say that his intention is to attract attention, but the nature of his walk to India and all the difficulties that he faced on the way is perfect materials to attract people attention to his journey.
Okay, and of course, RFA Vietnamese will keep a close eye on Thich Minh Tue, and for the latest about his story, please continue to look at the RFA English website if you're listening in English. And I thank you very much for coming on our podcast.
For the update.
Once again, we really always appreciate having you here.
Thank you for having me.
So for Eugene Huang and Sun, I'm Amy Lee, and we'll see you next time on RFA Insider.
See ya.
See you.
Like what you heard today? It would really mean a lot to us if you would like, subscribe, or follow this podcast. You can also share it on social media or even text messages. Feeling frisky? Give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or elsewhere. Goodbye for now, and we'll see you here for the next episode of RFA Insider. Sure? Yeah. All right.